my God. I love you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I'll just do the beginning. I was about 10 minutes. Yeah. Not much longer. I feel like I'm drooling. Oh, you guys want to give me water so you can watch me drool, right?
Yeah, do it. Do it.
I have to do it from this side.
Oh, dear.
Oh my gosh, I hate the dentist. I hate the dentist. It's brutal. Okay, so let me grab my book. I guess I didn't introduce myself in the very beginning. My name's Leanne. I'm a recovered addict and alcoholic.
Hello, Leanne.
So I'm going to go over how many of you had a chance to finish the homework? Look at you guys, overachievers. Listen, if this is your first workshop, this is the first time you came. I know a lot of people weren't here last week, and there are a lot of new people I saw that registered throughout the week. So if this is your first, it's easy to get caught up on the first assignment. Just so that you know, as we go through the work, I just want to kind of show you what your big book's going to look like. I'm going to show you a good page. So for those, I think there were some people that had a question, like, am I supposed to cross stuff out? So I'm going to show my people online. Can you guys see that? So see how, like, you write in the bottom margin, and then you write above the lines, and then pretty soon I do, like I said last week, I color coordinate everything. I have like 4 different color pens for different things. When I write in the margins, I use purple. When I make it a question, I make green. If it's a definition, I do red, and if it's my own notes, I do pink. So that's just how I do it, because I'm very visual and that works for me. For some people, it's not that necessary, but that's how I do it. But when you're writing in your big book, make sure you're not crossing out the original text. So, because we want to be able to read the big book, you're just making a question. I think somewhere in Dan Sherman's workbook, it says to cross it out. And I started doing that with my first book, and I crossed it out. And I learned that it's easier if I just don't cross it out, but if I write above it. Does that make sense for anyone? Did everyone just love writing in their big book? All right. Wait till you get to the doctor's opinion, and there's a solution. So I'm going to cover a few things. First thing I want to cover, though, is this is the first year that we're actually using this big book. It's the same 164 pages as the big book. We just don't have the stories in the back. And a lot of people like using this book because when you carry it around to meetings, it's a little easier. Usually most meetings don't read from the stories in the back. I've been to a few big book studies that read the stories in the back, but for the most part, we don't. The solution to our recovery is in the first 164 pages, and the steps are in the first 103 pages. So this book's a little easier to use. Now, since we don't have the stories in the back, that makes those Roman numerals in the very beginning very confusing. So who got the email, the weekly email that goes out that described how to change those Roman numerals? Oh my gosh. Okay. How many of you are using this book? Were you guys able to figure out how to change the Roman numerals? Do you guys get it? Okay. So I listen, if you're registered online, that automatically drops you into a database that I use called MailChimp, and MailChimp sends out emails once a week. So if you're not getting that email, 2 things are happening. Either you put in the wrong email address, or it's going into your spam box. And then you have to check your spam box. All right, and then you have to whitelist it, or however you have to get it so it goes into your regular inbox every week. Otherwise, you won't be getting the updates. In the last email that I sent out, I kind of told everybody how to do that. So, like I said, because the stories in the back of the big book, that changes the table of contents pages, because we don't have a table of contents for the stories in the back. So we're about 4 pages short in the table of contents. So for those of you who just love to use Roman numerals, if you go to the preface, if you go to the preface, which is the first page of the Roman numerals, and it says XVI at the bottom, change that. If you're using this book. If you're using the big book, you don't need to change anything, because the workbook is associated to the big book, okay, with the normal pages and stuff. But if you're using this abridged edition, you need to change the Roman numerals. Once you get to the numbered pages, Bill's story, which is right after doctor's opinion, you don't need to change anything. It's all right on. It's all right on. So the workbook is now in correlation with the big book, starting from Bill's story. The only difference, what you need to do now, is just change the Roman numerals. So if you're using this abridged big book, where it says XVI, next to it in parentheses put, I think that's XI. Yeah, XI. And then obviously XII would be the next one.
So
Subtract 4. Subtract 4. And then just do it all through all the preface and forewords and the doctor's opinions. And then once you do that, you change those pages, it'll make it easy. And then you can start changing, doing your writing in the big book. It makes it easier for you to follow this, because I did the same thing too. So, got it? Is everyone clear on that? All right. So in the very beginning of what we did is we put the set aside prayer in here, and I think what we need to do before we do meditation, and I forgot to do it this week, is that we're going to do this. We're going to say the set aside prayer, but we're going to say it now. So when you're doing the work with people and you're going through the work, I know a lot of you are partnered up. Those of you that are not partnered up tonight, please see myself and Pat and Mike and Shakira and talk to us after the workshop, and we will get you paired up with somebody. Okay? Yeah, how many of you, Mike and Shakira, keep your hands up. How many of you still need a partner a book partner, study partner? 1, 2, good. Oh, one male, one female. How coincidence? I think not. Oh, Kathy, and Kathy's back there too. Good. Anybody else? So we have 3 people. We'll pair you up after the meeting. We'll make sure that you've got a step study partner. So on the very first page, we put the set aside prayer. The set aside prayer, like Pat was mentioning last week, is not actually in the big book, but it is. It's kind of in We Agnostics. It asks us to lay aside prejudice when we get to We Agnostics. It'll make more sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to see that we need to set aside everything we think we know. A lot of us come into a lot of us have been, there's many of us here with many years, and we have a kind of an idea of what we think, what we think recovery should look like. And we're asking you to set aside what you think you know for an open mind and a new experience. And, I've heard people say a lot of times like, well, addicts shouldn't be I heard this one guy in AA saying, addicts shouldn't be using the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's going to kill them. I'm like you hear crazy things sometimes. And I'm like, have you heard of the Big Book Awakening? Oh, no, they can't do that. And I told him, I said, well, I'm not interested in anybody's experiences, anybody's opinion of something they've never experienced. So until you go through this work, then you can have an opinion of whether you think it works. But we want you to set aside what you think you know for an open mind and a new experience, so that we can see the truth about what this book is about. The truth about what this book is about. The truth. It's not a book on help me to stay sober. It's a book that's going to help me gain a closer relationship with God, who's going to solve my problems. Page 45, verbatim. That's what it says. So the general info is, so I think so if you could all open your book to the set aside prayer that you wrote on the beginning page here, and let's say this together. We're going to say the general info. So we're going to read, God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know, and then read the general info, okay, together. Ready? God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know for an open mind and a new experience. Help me see the truth about this book, the meetings, and the 12 steps, and my disease. And that's what we're going to cover today. So after the 3rd edition, has anybody been around since the 3rd edition of Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or has a 3rd edition? A few of you. So in the 3rd edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it had a circle and a triangle in it. They took it out for copyright reasons. So I don't know, politics or whatever. But it's very, very significant about how we need to look at our recovery and how we need to stay balanced in all areas of our recovery and even life. right? Does it make sense? Those of you online. So we put this, what we're going to do is we're going to put the circle and the triangle back in here. And then we're going to put why we put it in here. So the symbol was removed from the big book in the middle of 1994 because of copyright complications. The circle and triangle are also an ancient symbol meaning mind, body, spirit together as one. So when we look at the unity portion of that side, what does that mean? We've always seen it. Sometimes those of us have been around a while, or even if you haven't been around a while, we still see the circle and triangle, and we see unity, service, and recovery. And I think for me, for many years, for the first 4 years, I just kind of just blew it off. I never asked what it meant. The unity is that I bring my body to the meetings. It's the fellowship. This is the fellowship. I need the fellowship. I thought all I needed was the fellowship. I had a flat line. I didn't have a triangle. I did fellowship, and that's all I did. And I couldn't figure out why I was so batshit crazy. The recovery side is the big book, the 12 steps, and that we need to be in it. We need to be in it at all times. We need to what? Practice these principles, the principles of what the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in all of our affairs, right? And we can see how it will revolutionize our life. And then the service side is service, and if you're a newcomer, service can be helping set up tables. Service can be making coffee. Service can be anything. Service can be, but what they were really talking about back in those days was service was working one-on-one with another alcoholic. I mean, so basically, we've got unity, one side of the triangle, recovery, the 12 steps, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, being in the steps, practicing these principles, all of ours, and then step 12 as a whole nother side of this triangle. Step 12 gets a whole side of the triangle. And I was not practicing that in any area. Then I found a lot of times my recovery would lean super, like just on service, and I wasn't going to meetings, and I wasn't, in the 12 steps. And it's like a three-legged stool. A three-legged stool that has three equal-sized legs is going to be level. But even something that's if one leg is off, then what happens? Then we fall over. And I used to call my sponsor freaking out on the phone when I first got to Big Book Awakening. Tyler is my sponsor, for those of you who don't know her. And I'd call her up and I'd be screaming. She's like, "Where are you in your triangle? Where are you in your triangle?" And really, it kind of gave me the ability to kind of look and see where I was at. We're never always going to be perfectly balanced. Pat told me that the other day. Pat yelled at me. I'm like, "I'm just trying to be balanced." He's like, "Oh, you can't ever be perfectly balanced." But our goal is that we do get, we try to remit, and for us to be able to use that as a barometer or a thermometer of where we're at, and it'll make sense. So that's why we put it back into our big book. So any questions on the circle and the triangle? My throat. We wrote something at the bottom of our book that says, if AA is the meetings, the 12 steps outlined in the big book, and working with others, taking them through the 12 steps where I am in AA, the promise, if action is taken in these three areas, I can be whole, right? I can be whole like this circle. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over. Well, let me go over the table of contents really quick. Everybody knows now that you wrote the table of contents. I never knew the 12 steps from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who else was guilty of that? I thought that's what the 12 and 12 were for. I did. I thought that's what 12 and 12 were for, the 12 steps. And the big book was to read. And stay on my table, just to make everybody be impressed that I was in AA or something. I don't know. I never read it. But and I love that what the Big Book Awakening does is it shows you how to where the steps are. So it says the general information, right? That's what we just read. Set aside everything you think you know so we can have an open mind about the general information, the meetings, and AA as a whole. Step 1 starts with the doctor's opinion. We're going to look at that. Step, the physical craving is going to show us where the mental obsession is, the unmanageability of the spirit. And like I shared last week, we're going to go through the first 103 pages in the next 5.5 months. And out of those 103 pages, 52 of those pages are step 1. So don't get discouraged. Just dive in deep into the first step so that you're really clear on what that is and whether that applies to you and how it applies to you. Step 2 begins we agnostics, so on and so forth. So now I know where the steps are. They don't actually mention where the steps are till you get to what step? 3. Very good. Step 3 actually said it in italics. And then they start to say it in and then they'll write it in italics. But 1 and 2 are not mentioned in here, and I like that we are able to do that. Any questions on that? All right. And then I'm going to let Pat come up here and finish talking. And for those people that weren't here last week, maybe Pat can go back over the Max Jeter story briefly for those people that weren't here. How many people didn't hear that story about Max Jeter? A couple people. I think it's super important that we go through that again. Can you do that? You're awesome. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, you guys, for putting up with me. Okay.
Oh, poor girl. Holy cow. Hey, Zoomers. Hey, Karen. How are you doing? Yeah, good to see you, too. All right. Pat Alcoholic. Hi, Pat. Who all did their assignments? That is great. How many had fun with the writing? You're lying. Rigorous honesty. Wait till you do the doctor's opinion this week. That'll be the assignment. Let's do the assignment real quick. Your assignment will be an assignment number 2 out of your sponsor guide. You'll be doing assignment number 2. And so the writing that you're going to put in your big book from the Big Book Awakening, I'll tell you a little bit of the history on Max Cheater in this book. This is, I don't know which number this was, but it was one of my big books that I was still doing orally. I didn't have one of these. So, assignment number 2, out of the Big Book Awakening, you're going to put everything from this into this that covers the doctor's opinion. So on your full assignment, it starts out on Big Book Awakening page 9, okay? Where it says physical craving, the doctor's opinion, okay? So just so you're prepared, there's a little bit of writing to do this assignment. This will, and I know Leanne talked about it, but I just don't want to leave this undone. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages in here of transcription. And if you leave this till Monday night and think you'll have it done by Tuesday, you're not. It will not happen. Unless you call in sick from work, then you're going to feel guilty because you lied and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you won't feel guilty. You'll feel guilty later. But anyway, 5 pages. Give yourself some time to figure it out. Okay. Briefly, I want to talk about just a couple things. It's about 7:39. We're going to finish at approximately 8:05-ish. And there'll be plenty of time for people to get up here. And we're going to be talking about the circle and triangle. Some of that stuff, okay? But here's some of the history. The best way I could do it is start in the present and go backwards. This is one of my big books that I had from Denver, where I got sober. And in my Denver big book, you recognize the table of contents, all the writing, right? There's nothing extra. This is just the writing that my sponsor told me to write in. We didn't have a Big Book Awakening. Recognize this? This did not come from the Big Book Awakening. And it is identical down to, turn to your cover page where you put your circle and triangle in. And here's what mine says from Denver back in 2002. By the way, I never saw any Big Book Awakening stuff till about 2005. When I moved out here, Karen and I moved out here in 2005 from Denver. General information about AA, title page through XXIV. Sound familiar? Recovered is underlined. At the very bottom, promise, if action is taken in these 3 areas, I can be whole. Does that sound familiar? How did that happen? I didn't have this. I didn't have this guide. Here's how it happened. We got to go back in time to 1950. There's 9 drunks, and you know the kind of meeting. They come walking in, and they can't stay sober to save their lives. And all they're feeling is shame, which is ridiculous, by the way. Because if you, by the way, have the power to quit drinking or quit using on your own, don't worry about being in the workshop. And I'm really, stick around for the Design for Living because it is incredible. But you don't have the disease. All right? That's a big deal. So there's no shame. If people are relapsing, and even in the big book it talks about, we'll read it tonight, 50% of people that got this thing from 1935 to 1939 got sober at once. Another 25% of all the people coming, which was 50% of the original 50, you with me? Half the people didn't get it the first time around. They got it after some relapses. You're among good company if you've had some relapses. It's okay. And there was no shame. But these 9 guys didn't know there was no shame. They're up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And it's 1950. Big book came out in 1939. We got 11 years. And these guys just couldn't stay sober. They went to all the meetings that Leanne's talking about. They couldn't do it. And so they pulled a guy aside that had sobriety, that they looked at. This guy's got his life back together. We've heard his story. He's a drunk just like we are. He couldn't quit drinking. No matter what he tried, he couldn't stop. And when he did stop occasionally, he couldn't stay stopped. He's one of us. But the difference was this guy had stayed sober for 11 years, from 1939 to 1950. This guy's like, in today's world, it'd be a guy that you meet in the rooms that's 40 years of sobriety. It was forever. These 9 guys pull him aside after a meeting. They say, listen, we either get this or we're going to die. And we don't know what we're doing wrong. We're embarrassed to keep on showing up. Everybody doesn't even want us really around. They're sort of embarrassed for us, which was sort of crazy. And they said, so what we want to do is find a time where you could take us through the work, but we want to do it so that we're alone. And he said, well, I can't do that. It's Alcoholics Anonymous, so everybody's open to come. I'll be glad to take you through the work. And they said, but if you want, pick a time in a day that no one else will want to come. How about 6 a.m. on Sunday? That's what they did. So these 9 guys met with Max Cheater in the group from 1950 to about middle part of 1950, fall, 9 months. And 8 of the 9 guys stayed sober. One guy died, passed out in the snowbank outside and froze to death. 8 out of the 9 made it. Max Cheater became sort of like the spokesman of these little guys. And what they did is the guy took them 1 page at a time in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
If you can hear me, you need to unshare your screen, please, because we can't. Our screens are all messed up. Or sign
Did I
out,
touch
sign
it?
back
No,
in,
there should be a
please.
mute. Does anyone know how to do that?
Karen, do you know what you're doing there?
I'll figure that electronic.
Oh. How do we unmute? Just a second, guys. Sorry. We good, Karen? We good, Karen? Good. Okay, that says I'm unmuted, so we're good. All right, good. Okay. Back up. Here we go. And so these guys stayed sober, turning statements into questions 1 page at a time. And this guy was so loving, and he said, listen, some of you guys are more screwed up than others. We're going to take it slowly. If somebody falls behind, we're all going to fall behind. We're all going to wait. We're not going any faster than the slowest person in the room. Sign of love. They loved each other through the steps. The result was amazing. These guys' lives changed miraculously. Families were reassembled. Business, their ability to go into business and actually make a living for themselves happened. Their ability to get healthy, their ability to have relationship, their ability to be happy, joyous, and free was contagious. In fact, people in the regular meetings were going, what the heck did you guys do? And it became legendary. So much so that in 1975, Max Cheater was invited to Alcoholics Anonymous, the international convention that was being held in Denver, Colorado. They said, would you please come from Canada and tell us what you guys have been doing for the last 25 years? Because it's incredible. He said, I'd be happy to. So he ran a workshop. And in the workshop was a guy named Don Pritz, another guy named Gary Brown, another guy named Bob Olson, and a bunch of other guys. I won't mention names. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is these guys were in Denver, and they bought off on what he said. And they started taking other people through the work. Well, fast forward a couple of years, they ended up taking 2 more people through the work, Mark Houston and Joe Hawk. And Mark Houston and Joe Hawk ended up doing workshops and doing speaking engagements, much more so than even Don Pritz was doing. And Joe Hawk is doing his 9-step amends, because one of the beliefs that we have and one of the things that we'll do in here is that you're going to make all of your amends, not just some. Make all. And Joe Hawk had left his toughest ones to last, the ones he didn't ever want to touch, and they happened to come out to Santa Monica, California. He comes out to Santa Monica, California, and one of the guys that he meets is a guy named Dan Sherman. Dan Sherman couldn't stay sober either. Joe Hawk took him through the work, page by page, statements into questions. And Dan said, would it be helpful if we put this in some kind of booklet, because this is a lot of stuff to absorb when your mind's fresh and you can't even, hardly hold a pen. Would it be helpful if we put this into a booklet? And Joe Hawk says, knock yourself out. The outcome was this, by Dan Sherman. And what Dan did is he took all of the oral verbiage. I'd sit with my sponsor, and we'd start at one page, and he said, Pat, get out your pen. Write this down. In the left-hand margin, put this. Right-hand margin, put that. On top, put this. Underline this word. Put an asterisk and go over here and say, do I believe? And that's how it passed on. That's the story. Is that helpful? Okay, now you can pass it on. It's a good story. What it tells you and tells me is that this is Alcoholics Anonymous. This isn't an additive. This isn't a subtraction. This is oral tradition going back further than any other way of going through the work. From 1954, what is this, 2020, we're 70 years into this methodology and it has not changed. Why? Because it works. It works. So that's the history there. Now, I want to go into the circle and triangle for a second, because when we come in here, all of us have a circle and a triangle in our life. The problem is, it doesn't look like a circle and triangle. It looks like this. Anybody recognize that symbol? You guys, what is it? Not equal. Exactly. Doesn't add up. The left side doesn't add up to the right side. One of these lines is my body. One of these lines is my mind. This guy going across, that's my spirit. And the problem is, all 3 of them are all messed up. My mind is all about me. My mind's saying, life is about me, and I'm going to figure it out, and it's going to be good. And I keep trying to make you do what I want you to do, and you won't do it. And I try harder. I double down. I do it, I do it, I do it. And I can't get it done. And so I find relief in what? My drink and my drug. I've got to have some relief because you guys are driving me to the drink and the drug. You guys are killing me. It's terrible. You guys will not cooperate. What's happening in my body? The longer I have in this disease, the more I isolate. I don't go around people. If I am around people, I'm not there. You know what I'm saying? I'm present, but not really. Body only. And then what's going on in my spirit? My spirit is, again, all about me. There's no service to anybody else. There's no other thinking. There's no sense of what could I do for you. And here's a dirty little secret that you're going to learn in step 9, but I'm going to give you a little push on it right now. Is in order to get to this, where we are whole, happy, joyous, and free, which is not words, it's truth. It happens in our lives. It happens as a result of going through this work that we're doing for the next 23 weeks, 22, 23 weeks. I'm lonely, I'm depressed, I'm self-centered. The anger in my mind is, I got resentments, I got fears, I'm being chased around by everything in my life, in my head, and I can't be present with you because you're going to find out how screwed up I am. So I start avoiding. In the spirit, by this time, I don't even believe in God. God doesn't do anything for me. God may work for you, but I think it's just sort of a joke. It's a cop-out. It doesn't work. And so I've turned off God, I've turned off you, and I've turned off me. And I'm wondering why I'm so screwed up. The circle and the triangle is an ancient symbol which simply means my life is whole when all these parts are working together. And the coolest thing is, it's not about us reorganizing our life. It's not about us trying one more time. It's about God of your understanding doing for you, doing for me what I can't do for myself. That's what this story is about. Step 1 is all about what I can't do. Step 2 is all about what I don't have, power. Step 3 is I've pushed my chips all in on the table and I've found out that I'm a self-will run riot. I'm a joke. I can't manage my life. I can't direct my life. I can't represent my life. I can't protect my life. I can't create my life, and I can't work for my life. How's that? It's pretty amazing. So let's hear the history. How many did you guys read these forwards? Did you get a kick out of that? There's so much good stuff in here, and I truly get excited about the circle and the triangle because it's everything that we're doing. You know, Leanne talked about it a lot. I'm talking about it a lot. We'll still keep on talking about it a lot because it's everything. It's where we're going. It's where we're going. So, and we'll talk about the body right now. We're going to be talking about the body as we go forward here. So, in the preface, which is Roman numeral, let's see, 4 back from 11 is what? That's 7. I can almost do the math today. Thank you very much. I'm going crazy. It says here, this is more than a book. Let's see here. More than a book designed to transmit information. It's a book that's designed to transmit what? An experience. So this isn't about gathering book knowledge. It's about really asking questions with your step buddy. It's about really going through this work. I need more than knowledge to stay sober for good. And then it says in that second paragraph, it's a basic textbook. So we're actually going to study this thing. And then the first portion of the book, this volume describing the AA recovery program, has been left largely untouched. And that happens even today. Most people leave the big book largely untouched. Okay? In the course of revisions made from the second, third, and fourth edition. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as it was originally written in 1939, and by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great benefactor. And so as we go through this thing, if you turn to the page, Roman numeral 12 in the big book, or Roman numeral, God, I can't do my math tonight, 8, Roman numeral 8, 5 III. The bottom paragraph says, all changes made over the years in the big book have the same purpose: to represent the current membership more accurately. But it's going to ask us some questions. If you have a drinking problem or a drug problem, hope you read some of these stories in the back. If you don't have a big book, you could see some of the stories in the big book. Let's ask us 3 questions. Did this happen to me? In other words, the experiences that these guys are relating to. Did I feel like that? In other words, what was my feeling? Can I relate to what they're saying? Or most importantly, do I believe, am I willing to believe a little bit more than not believe that this program can actually work for me? How many people came in here, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many people came in here going, I'm going to give it one more shot, And I'm pretty well convinced it's not going to work, but what the hell? I'm going to give it a shot. Bill came in that way.
Yep.
Bill's life, is your life the same as it was 3 years ago, buddy? No, not even close. But, he was honest. He said, I don't know if this will work. Mike came in that way. I think you're giving me crap about this whole God thing, Pat. You really believe that stuff? Remember that? I go, yeah, I really do. He says, prove it. And we did. We did. Forward to the first edition. I'm going to just highlight a couple pages, and then we'll be opening up here. The coolest thing about what these guys are trying to do, and you got to catch the flavor of this. There's 100 of these guys, and from 1935 to 1939, they're experimenting with how to pull this thing off. The interesting thing is that the steps that we go through tonight and through these next 23 weeks, the original 100 didn't go through because they really weren't there. There weren't 12 steps. There were 6 steps. There were 6 steps. Let me give you a hint what they looked like. This is one of the reasons sometimes having the big book is helpful. On page 263, here are the original 6 steps of the program. And it's in a story called He Sold Himself Short. Here's what it says. Complete deflation. What step does that sound like?
1.
Good. Dependence and guidance from a higher power. 3, right? Good. Moral inventory. 4. Confession. Some people, remember, we're going to set aside our prejudice about spiritual terms. You're going to hear weird words, and maybe you have some upbringing that you go, I ain't doing the confession deal. I saw the guy in the robe in the little cubicle, didn't want any part of that deal. It screwed up my Saturdays immensely, or whatever it was, okay? Next one, restitution. Ooh. Continued work with other alcoholics. So those are the original 6 steps. And Bill liked 12. And so he broke it down because he thought people are going to wiggle and waggle and they're going to try to get away with something. And if they don't get this thing, I got to take away as much wiggling as possible so they could get clear on exactly what we're trying to do. And these guys fought between New York and Akron and Cleveland on writing this big book. I mean, there was like bust out wars on verbiage and what should we say? Because Bill was going, you need to do this and you need to do that. And finally one of the guys said, Bill, quit preaching at me. How about we?
Okay.
We need to do this. We needed to do that. Right? And then, he's going, and God, and God, and God. And everybody was freaking out from New York because they didn't believe in the God concept in big way. And by the way, New York's recovery rate was 30%. 30%. Akron, 75%. Strong belief, strong dependence on God. Cleveland, stronger belief, stronger dependence on God. Guess what their percentage of recovery was? 93%. Which one do you want? You want to be in the 30 category or the 93 category? Me too. And so they go, and so a guy comes up with it, and there's one of the guys that was given credit for this was Jim Burwell. He lived here in San Diego, and there was a couple guys in Chicago, one guy in New York, and one guy in Cleveland. They said, well, how about we just call it God of your understanding? Because Bill, remember when Ebby came to you? He didn't tell you to just believe in his God. He said, your own conception of God. Now the cool thing is, the dirty little secret is if we're really searching deep down within, we're all going to come to God. That's the way it's going to be. So they were so committed to making sure we didn't screw it up. And what they did is they said that in the forward to the first edition, it said, this book is for precisely, see that squiggly lines? Precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. We're going to give away to you what's been given to us from trial and error, and we want to be as clear as we know how to be. Squiggly lines, I'm going to say this one time, it's worth it. In 1939, when they're making the big book, they don't have a pot to piss in. They have no money. Man, the big book almost didn't get out of the press. The big book almost didn't get out of the publisher's warehouse. There was no money. They were dodging creditors and dodging bankruptcy where they're going to swipe back the big book. None of us would even have it. But it was so important to them when they were printing this thing, they said, some of the words that we're going to put in this big book, Bill, have to be emphasized. How do we do that? And he said, well, we could put them in italics, squiggly lines. But if we do that, it's super expensive because they have to stop the printing press. They have to clean the printing press. They have to put the other block letter, the cursive letters in, the squiggly line letters in, run the press, stop the press after they ran the 5 or 6 or 7 words, because see, they couldn't leave a space back in those days. Put the press block letters back in, clean them off, start the press again. Every time they did that, it was ka-ching on the publishing cost for this big book. So when you see these squiggly lines, those are money words. Money words. Precisely how we recovered. We want to say anonymous, and it wasn't because they were scared of people knowing who they were. It was because we remain anonymous because we're too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals that would result from this publication. Does that sound like what you heard about anonymity? That's crazy, isn't it? Now there's another component. Hey, the guy is embarrassed. The guy doesn't want everybody in the whole world, the whole universe to know what's going on. But what they put down in the big book for the forward is we couldn't handle all the requests. The press is up. The press loves them. And here's the interesting thing towards the end of the first forward. It says, we're not an organization in the conventional sense. There's no fees or dues. The only requirement, look at the word they put in here. The only requirement, this is on the end of the forward to the first edition, the only requirement for membership is an honest desire. They took that word out. They took that word out in future successive printings. You know why? They were scared the guys who were having trouble being honest about anything in their lives wouldn't get this deal. They'd think they couldn't join Alcoholics Anonymous. See, their heart was always being led. Their heart was, every page in this book is a heart letter to you and to me. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. We even want, and listen to this, we shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book. The purpose of this book was for the people to know it and do what with the book? Share it with others. To take another man, take another woman through this work. Wow. Forward to the second edition. That's the history of how this thing, okay, I'm already shot by. Okay, can I go for 5 more minutes? I'm sorry. Are you cool with that? Anybody not cool with that? I can stop. It's cool. All right. Forward to the second edition. We're not going to talk much about the third and the fourth forwards. We're going to talk about the forward to the second edition. This deal is telling us that this program exploded. In 1939, when they wrote this book, there were less than 100 drunks. There was only 3 groups. That was it. 103 groups. In 1955, there's how many groups? 6,000. From 3. 6,000 groups. And from 100 drunks to 150,000 recovered drunk. Do you think this thing's working? That's why they said there's a wholesale miracle that's taking place. We are not responsible for it. God's doing for us what we can't even do for ourselves. We can't even believe this. And we're all over the United States. We're all over the world now in 1955. And if you fast forward over to 1976 when the third edition was done, the third edition says that now there's 1 million of us running around. I can't find it. There's 28,000 groups. 1 million recovered alcoholics and addicts, and there's 28,000 groups. And then when we get to 2001, there's 2 million recovered alcoholics, and over 100,800 groups. It's mind-boggling how big and explosive the growth is. And so what happened? What caused all this thing? Well, the second edition, and you could go into this in some detail, and if you really want to read it, you could read a book called AA Comes of Age. It's an AA-approved literature. It's a beautiful story of how this thing started. But I'm going to give you a quick, like a fast track on what happened. There's a bunch of people. Bill Wilson can't stay sober. It's 1934. He'd been in the hospital for 4 times. And he can't get it done. Dr. Silkworth tells him, who wrote the doctor's opinion, says, Lois, Bill's wife, your husband's going to die. Or he's going to go wet brain criminal. He's going to go insane. You have to lock him up. He's going to go insane or he's going to die. Probably DTs. Because he was able to stay sober 2-3 months and go out in a bender. That's what was happening to him towards the end. Lois says, is there any hope? Nope. Not a doggone stitch. Nothing. Interesting. Bill grew up with a guy named Ebby Thatcher. Ebby Thatcher up in Vermont. And these guys are hanging out as high school chums. And Ebby shows up at Bill's house and he's sober. We'll tell more about that when we get to Bill's story. But he's sober. And he had been sober for a couple months. And Bill Wilson hadn't seen Ebby Thatcher sober in 20 years. Never. Ebby Thatcher grew up with a guy named Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard got sober in 1932, 3 years before the big AA started. Roland Hazard was a rich old guy, a rich young medium-aged guy, and tons of dough. Couldn't stay sober. They wanted to send him over to see Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud's too busy for him, so they say, who's the best? Who's the second best? Well, this guy over in Switzerland, I don't know if you know him, his name is Carl Jung. Why don't you go over there and see him? And he said, well, how long do I have to stay? He said, well, for you, you're going to have to see him every day for a year. A year? Every day? Yeah, that's what our recommendation is for you. So he does that with Carl Jung. Carl Jung gives him all of his best. He gets done with it. He goes out. He can't stay sober. He gets drunk right away after a year. God. He's blown away. And he comes back to Carl Jung and he says, basically, is there anything that I could do to pull this thing up? Said Carl Jung looks at him and says, nope, you are a dead man. Once in a while I see these amazing spiritual awakenings, but I can't really put my finger on what caused it. If you get that, you got a shot at it. Because see, it's not about your mind, it's about your heart, it's about your spirit. And I can't reach it. See, I'm a doctor. I can't touch the spirit. And I believe Roland Hazard, every time you touch the drink, you're trying to touch the Spirit of God with the spirits. Mm-hmm. Roland goes, God, I'm a great Episcopal church member in New York. Not enough. It won't work. Carl Jung says, I've heard of this group called the Oxford Group. Why don't you try them? And I happen to know a guy. His name is Sam Schumacher. 1932. He goes to see a guy named Sam Schumacher, who's the priest, the pastor, whatever you want to call him, over in New York at Calvary Church. He gets hooked up with the Oxford Group, does these 6 steps that we just talked about. He stays sober for the rest of his life. He goes, Ebby Thatcher, he knows Ebby Thatcher, and he goes back to his summer residence, and Ebby Thatcher, in the meantime, gotten in trouble with the law, and they're going to lock him up this time. And 2 other guys are with him, Sebra Graves and a guy named Shep Cornell. And those 2 guys stood with Ebby when he's getting ready to be sentenced, and on the bench is Shep Cornell's uncle. And Roland Hazard's with him, and Shep Cornell's uncle, the judge, has been watching Roland Hazard's life from a hopeless drunk to a stand-up citizen. Roland vouches for Ebby Thatcher. Give him to me. I'll give him the same treatment that I went through. I think we could do something here. And the judge said yes. They took him over to see Sam Schumacher in New York. He gets sober, and guess who Ebby's best friend is? Bill Wilson. Do you think the hand of God is active? Bill Wilson, 1934, December the 11th, gets sober. 1934. He can't keep anybody sober for 6 months. he's trying to get his business back together. He's a New York stock guy. And he hears about this deal, and he forms a group that they're going to invest and take over this company in Ohio. He gets there, and the deal goes south, and he's worried that he's going to drink because he's really shaky, because he hadn't been able to get anybody else sober. He stayed sober for 6 months, longest he's ever been sober. But he has no money. He's scared to death that he's going to drink. He hears people having a good time in the bar, Mayflower Bar, which 2 years before, the Oxford group made 2 stops in the United States. See, it started over in Oxford, England. They made a stop in New York, and of all places, Akron, Ohio. You think that was an accident? There's a whole story behind that, and I'll tell you that some other time. Bottom line is, God, I get excited with this. Bottom line is, Bill calls up, looks at the directory, and he calls up a guy named Walter Tunks. You know why? Because when he was growing up in Vermont, a tunk was another word for a walkabout. And Bill was a nature guy. And he thought the name was sort of cool. He had no idea that Walter Tunks of the entire directory was the only guy affiliated with the Oxford group. Of all the preachers, all the religious guys in town. He was the one guy. 2 weeks before this happened, Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, who had been going to the Oxford group now for a year with 3 other ladies, finally got Dr. Bob to tell everybody else in the room at the Oxford group, because Dr. Bob's been trying to go get sober for a long time, and he says, I'm a secret drinker. Dr. Bob tells the rest of these Oxford group ladies and some other people that he's a secret drinker, and they go, Dr. Bob, we've known you're a drinker forever. I mean, hell, you're passed out every Sunday afternoon in Ann's house. This is not a mystery. You're a proctologist, for God's sake, and you're operating on people and your hand's shaking. You know what a proctologist does? Operates on assholes. Could you imagine a drunk doctor working on your ass? It's a little scary. So Dr. Bob gets honest about this thing, and he still can't get sober. It's 2 weeks, a couple more weeks. And Ann and Henrietta Seiberling start praying, and they figure God's going to do something miraculous. And they get this call from Walter Tunks through this guy named Bill Wilson, who calls himself a rum hound from Brooklyn. And he says, I need to talk to another drunk for me to stay sober. Do you know anybody? And Henrietta Seiberling, one of the gals that was praying with Ann Smith, says, yeah, I do. We've been waiting for your call, Bill, for 2 weeks. Bill says, I don't even know who you are. He says, yeah, but we know who you are. You were sent from God. Mother's Day, Bill and Dr. Bob actually meet, and there's a whole story behind that. Dr. Bob didn't want to see Bill. He was going to go for 15 minutes to appease his wife and then go back to drinking. He stayed for 5 hours with Dr. Bob. You know why? Because one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, one recovered alcoholic who found the way out of hell, reached his hand into Dr. Bob and said, I know the way out. I'm just like you. I'm a hopeless to die drunk. There is no hope in me. And he told Dr. Bob the story that Dr. Silkworth told Bill. He said, Bill, you're going to die because you have a twofold condition of your body and your mind. Your body can't handle alcohol. It's going to make you drink till you die. When you touch it, it's an allergy, allergic reaction. You can't control it. And when you're not drinking, your mind is totally screwed up, and it's going to drive you back to obsessing about the drink to the place where you can't ignore it. And there's a strange mental blank spot, and you're going to drink whether you wanted to or not. And Bill said, I know. I've done it 1,000 times. And we'll read about a couple of those stories in Dr. Bob, and Bill's story. He said, is there any hope? And this is where Ebby came in, because Ebby said, I couldn't do it. I got religion. That was Ebby's answer to Bill Wilson. And Bill had nothing but contempt for what he was saying, but he said, hell, it's working for you. I can't have contempt. I got to try it. So he had total contempt. Then he looked at his situation about the facts that he couldn't drink, and he could not drink. He decided to trust what Ebby said, and he did what he did. And then he shares that same message with Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob has a relapse, big time relapse, goes on a bender. And Bill and Ann and Henry Cyberly and all these guys are waiting. And they're going, God, where'd he go? Well, we went to a medical convention in Philly, but he never came back. He ended up in New York on a 3-day bender, blackout. He's off to the races. He finally comes back to Akron. They finally get him back. And this is on a Saturday, and they detox him for 2 days with some orange juice and K-roll syrup. And they get him sort of steadied because he's got to go do surgery on Monday because the depression, they have no money. They can't just hang out. He's got to go do the surgery. Lucky patient on Monday morning. So he's still shaking on Monday morning, and so Bill and Ann give him 3 beers to calm him down, and basically like a little pick-me-up on top of the beers. He goes in, does a surgery, and he doesn't come home. They think he's off to the races again, but he's not. He's going out now and making amends to all the people in the community because he's too scared, too frightened to do it before because he's trying to save his face. This time he's trying to save his ass. June 10th, 1935, Alcoholics Anonymous is born. And that's the message we're going to pass on to each of you for the next 22 weeks. Was this helpful?
Yeah.
You got a little time. You got 15 minutes. We'll share it with you. So here's what I want you guys to talk about. Yeah, it's a big group, and I don't expect people to get up here and just get all vulnerable and everything else. But share a little bit about where you are. Are you in that circle and triangle, or are you in that not equal zone? We could be dry from the drink or the drug from a long time and be in the not equal zone. Things don't add up in our lives. Okay? Let's share a little bit. Mikey.
My name is Mike. I'm a recovered addict. I was thinking to myself when I was sitting in here, I'm doing the work again all the way through from the beginning, since the first time that I did the work. And just so many, first of all, I had to thank Pat and Leanne. They come and they do these workshops for us the last so many years in a row. And it's a 6-month workshop, and they always take the time out of their days. They take the money out of their pockets. They do so much for us and to help people like us that I just want to recognize Pat and Leanne for what they do. It's absolutely incredible. But then I had the question, and my question was, why are you here? I don't see a basket for all the court slips. This is a pretty big room right now of alcoholics and addicts and other 12-step programs. And I don't see any court slips. And it makes me think that the people in this room are just like me. Because when I came in here, I had just tried to hang myself probably about just a few months before. And when I had tried to hang myself and the thing that I used had broke, I went back to the rooms. And I went back to the rooms, and when I was in the rooms, I was like, if this is what being clean is supposed to look like, I don't want it. Right? But it's interesting because I did the workshop, I think it was four years ago. I did this BBA workshop, and I didn't think it was going to work for me. Because I've been an addict for so long, and my life had been a mess for so long, that I just couldn't get right, man. I just couldn't get right. And it is true. I thought that as long as I just stopped doing drugs, things will straighten out. And I just couldn't stop. But I'll tell you what, I did come here 4 years ago. I did do the workshop, and it changed everything. It changed everything. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to fight that no more. when my mind would switch and I'd be going to my connects, talking about just turn around. Just this time, turn around. Cheating on the woman that I was with, never being able to show up as the man I wanted to be for my partners or my daughter, or my employer. I just wanted so bad to be that man. Man, I'll tell you what though, man, but I did this workshop and it changed everything. It changed my heart. It changed my relationships. I'm able to start showing up as the man I've always wanted to be. And I really commend all you guys for being here. And I really hope that this transcribing and this thing that we have to do, that everybody takes the time to do it, because this is such a great journey and it's your personal journey. And if there's anything you ever did, I would just highly just encourage that. And we're all here to help everybody and to support everybody. And I remember three years when I didn't think this was going to work for me, and things started to change, and it was nothing short of miraculous. But then the next workshop, I wanted to help out, man, because it's so powerful. And I remember the next workshop, it was the next year. I remember Bill. And man, I get a little teared up, man, because I remember Bill came in, and Bill, man, you were so brave and courageous and honest. But I remember when Pat said in the very first meeting, yeah, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, man, because it's a beautiful thing. But Pat said, was asking people, why are they here? And I remember Bill stood up. Bill, man, hardcore Bill. You could tell, man, Bill's hardcore. He's man. And I remember he stood up and Bill had tears in his eyes. And he said, I just want to stay out of prison. And I was like, and now he did the workshop, and it's like 3 years later, and his whole life has changed, man. This shit's real. And then I also met another woman. I met Buffy 3 years ago as well. And it was her first workshop as well. And if you ladies don't know Buffy, get to know her, man. Amazing woman. And I saw this woman, and she'll tell you her own story, but the transformation from being in a place where we go to being a woman that has her children, she's raising her children, she's finishing school, almost top of the class, right? Mm-hmm. At least 2. But just amazing stories and amazing things from people that are no different. I'm bottom of the, I'm an IV user, meth addict, talking about bathhouses, doing whatever I had to do to get my fix. I'm that guy, But this stuff worked for me, so thank you so much for letting me share. Thanks.
Good evening, family. How's everybody doing? My name is Shakira, and I'm grateful to know that I am a recovered dopeaholic. And I'm just so elated to be here tonight. I started this journey with BBA approximately 3 years ago. I have a number of chronological years in the program. As a matter of fact, in about 4 hours, I'll be celebrating 29 years of continuous sobriety. But my recovery really started right here in BBA. You see, there's this entity or this phenomena called untreated addiction. Okay? My idea of recovery was to be able to walk around and be the center of attraction. My ego was directing my life. To get a job that I'm proud of, that makes me look good, to get the house up on the hill, to have a nice car, and to hang out with the best social groups. That was my idea of recovery. That is not recovery. I was dying on the inside. I did not have that relationship with God that this program requires in order for you to grow. I had heard Leanne and Tyler speak at a program, and they were talking about the spiritual malady, and I'm going like, what the fuck is that? I had more chronological time than Leanne, but she said some things that just ministered to my heart, and I thought, hey, I want what she's got. So I stalked her and Tyler, and I followed them to Old Town, and then I met Pat, and I came to the first workshop, man, and I got on fire, and I think that first year, that first 6 months, I don't think I missed a workshop, and I moved from the 3rd row to the front row, and I started taking copious notes, and I started doing the work, and my life began to change internally, and I developed a relationship with God that is now carrying me through some major challenges in my life. And no matter what happens, I have the faith, okay, that I'm here to do a mighty work for God. And that is to carry the message that through this process, I can be all that God intended me to be. I've seen individuals come to BBA with their heads bowed down, their shoulders cowered down, and feeling totally and completely inadequate and like not enough. And now they're standing tall with dignity and saying, I can. I'm God's child. Okay? I used to fear this thing called a relationship with God. And today, the best and most powerful relationship that I have is that relationship with God. And I found that relationship vis-a-vis working the 12 steps. I didn't get it otherwise, guys, because I was going to meetings where I was hearing the problem articulated over and over again. So I stopped going to meetings. So the unity piece, okay, just wasn't there. I stopped going to meetings. Or if I went, I was taking your inventory. Man, I'm tired of hearing the problem. Here is the solution right here. We talk about going to meetings, which is a part of that equilateral triangle. We also talk about recovery, which is the steps and the traditions, right? And then we talk about the third part of that triangle, which is what? Service, okay? And that's where we address that spiritual malady that we all have. I could go on and on and on because I am still hyped up 3 years later. I am on fire for BBA, okay? And I brought some of my recovery comrades with me tonight. A lot of people look at me sometimes and go, well, hey, there's some contempt prior to investigation. I understand that because I used to be there too. But today, I practice honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to change and grow. Thank you.
All right. Zoomers, no time for you guys tonight. I'm sorry. We got to stop on time. Kieran, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Zoomers, wake up. That's not true. Okay, everybody, we're going to, you hear a lot about God in this room. In chapter called Working with Others, it tells specifically how the recovered alcoholic was to identify and talk with a suffering alcoholic. And they never mix words. We are not here to tell you what your belief in your higher power looks like. It's up to you. But the higher power is the entire deal as we go through this. And as we go through step 1, the goal is for you and me, once again, to get really clear, am I the real deal alcoholic? Am I the real deal addict? Am I hopeless? Do I have any wiggle room left to do anything other than this work? And if the answer turns out, no, I'm all done wiggling, then there's mighty, incredible hope on the other side. So we're going to close off, and if you turn over in your big book, we're going to do the third step prayer. And again, we're not at the third step. I get it, okay? But I want to give you a hint on where you're going to go. So in your big book, turn over to page 67. Whoop, sorry, my bad. 63. Okay? And look at this, my poor big book. I can't see it. All right, here we go. It's it says, we were now at the step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as what? There you go. As you personally understand your conception of a higher power. We're going to talk a lot about that as we go forward. So let's get up and let's get into a big circle.
Before we do, can I make an announcement?
Yeah. Because we have to do the food.
Yeah. Is there anybody who wants to volunteer to bring food next week? We pay you back. Anybody?
We'll give you money and pay you.
Who's the chef?
Okay.
We had pizza this week and it was awesome. It was perfect.
And we can give you suggestions.
And we'll. Anybody? Buffy? Buffy's in?
Want to do it?
Both you guys?
It doesn't matter.
Janie, you want to do
Want
it?
to do it?
Buffy.
Okay, you next week, and then, okay, Buffy. All right.
So who's doing it next week? Janie, you're doing it next week? Awesome. All right. Or is Buffy doing it?
If Buffy's doing this, I'll do it this week. And then next week.
Okay, so Buffy's doing it next week. Got it.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
mean. And then next week for June.
Got it. So, in your big book, because it's always a little bit freaky when you hear everybody else has it memorized and you're sitting there going, yum, 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 yum. You know, I'm doing the mouthing thing. So, when you get home, turn over to page 63 and read the second paragraph. So, we'll say that prayer and we'll start. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may dare do thy will. Take away my difficulties, and victory over them may bear witness to those I'd help. Thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Stay for 5.5 months. Stay.
Yay, Karen! Yay! Thank you, Zoomers. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Love seeing you guys. Karen, thank you. Thank you. Zoomers. Yay! Fist pump. Fist pump. There you go. There you go. Thank you, guys. Fist pump. Fist pump. All right, guys. Hey, and Zoomers, if you have any questions, make sure you email to either Leanne or to me. We'll respond, okay? If you have any questions, we're all good. We'll see you guys later, okay? We love having you here. Bye, guys. How are you, buddy?
Good. Good to see you.
How'd you do tonight? How'd you do?
Good.
Good?
Oh, for me?
No, him.
He's fine. I like hearing you.
We were on it.
Huh?
We were on it. Isn't that cool how that stuff all came together?
I know. Oh, yeah. I love that story. I love that you know it. And we can sit by the fire and talk about it.
Dude, there's so much more.
All right, so where to go? Well, then we get together.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you. Oh, hey guys, if you didn't get the basket, see you guys later.
Is there anyone here who needs to take somebody through the work? If you need to take someone through the work, please come and see me. No, I need someone to guide someone through the work. If you've done the work before and you need a sponsee or a step partner. If you need a girl?
I need a partner.
Don't go anywhere. What? We'll see her right here. Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes. Hi, good. How are you? What's your name? Okay. And Nettie, do you need to take someone, or do you need to go through work with somebody?
Yeah.
Where do you live?
I live in Ocean Beach.
In Ocean Beach? And are you heroin, alcohol, drugs?
Alcohol becomes cocaine, alcohol becomes crystal meth, and pot goes with everything.
So when you drink, you break out in syringes?
No, I don't spit it off. I smoke it, snort it, and eat it.
Okay.
This is my second AA meeting. I've been sober now for like 7 months.
Okay.
I've been going NA only. And I found this clubhouse in Ocean Beach, an AA clubhouse. And I'm really on the verge of having
Hey guys, everybody is still here. If you could help us set down the chairs and just take your chairs over to this far wall. Anybody who wants to help out, you're welcome to do so. We're going to try to do it.
Pat, he's
You want?
I'll help with the chairs. Once they start seeing me do it, they'll start helping me.
Yeah. Let me right back.
Talk to this. I need to talk to this guy.
Yeah, you do. You talk to him, and he bought this, and he wants to see this physical book. We haven't.
And then need someone to take my work.
Oh,
Yeah. Don't go anywhere.
All right, thanks so much. I'm not going.
Andrew, are you taking anybody through right now? You're taking one person through, right? Never saw me.
Good point. That's like somebody told me they're married.
Done your reading and writing, right?
So our assignment, we'll do our diligence, okay?
Go back and It's all tailored. Oh my God.
Oh, it's all right. Yeah. You too. You
Where's this going?
I like that.
What is this for? Thank you.
Sometimes, because you know, CDs are in. When these guys are so big and they work out better. But they like, they can't pull off the CDs because like, they're too tight. You know, like they're too tight. And it's distracting when they're on the